Sophie Hardy and the Changeling Hybrid by M.R. Dale, narrated by Leona Hall. Chapter 27, Listening In. As Sophie got closer, her ears made out words like destruction and doom and disaster, but they became a lot clearer as the four of them stopped and were able to pay closer attention. "She will bring judgment on those that live on this earth," Desmeralda continued mid-sentence, and Sophie began to feel a bit freaked out. "There is no force on this earth that will stop her. Come with us." Desmeralda signalled towards what Sophie recognised as a monticello and anastomy on a makeshift stage. "And seek sanctuary," Desmeralda continued. "Where will we go?" a voice shouted up. Sophie craned to see what it was, but couldn't see over the top of some of the creatures which now surrounded her. There weren't just changelings watching on, there were all sorts of mythical creatures, and in a way, Sophie was loving it. However, something that stood out to Sophie was that a lot of the mythicals didn't look like they'd been struggling for 10 years. Most of them didn't look drained, or tired, or dishevelled like she would have expected of someone if they'd lived in pain or isolation for 10 years. Quite a lot of them looked fit, healthy, and well, all things considered, and that to Sophie didn't add up. Desmeralda looked towards the portal and pointed. "Come with us. We will save you." "What is she on about?" Clara whispered to Sophie without moving her lips. "Is she tricking them into going to the underworld?" Sophie hypothesised. "But all of these creatures know what she is. Why would they listen to her? She's clearly a changeling, and they must know where she's going," Clara replied. "Why is there a monk and a silent creature up there?" Yasmin asked. Miss Sissons explained through their earpieces what they were, as Sophie was still thinking hard. "I've no idea what their names are, or who they actually are," she concluded, and Yasmin still felt none the wiser despite Miss Sissons' best efforts. "We can't leave Earth defenceless," another voice shouted. "I've lived here all my life. I can't just abandon it." Desmeralda stopped what she was about to say and turned to look at whoever had said it. She beckoned the voice forward. "Come forward," she said calmly and welcomingly. Sophie was beyond confused now. The changelings appeared to be organising a rescue, not an attack. Towards the stage walked one of the fawns that had run past them earlier. It had goat legs and a body of a human. Sophie recognised it from some of the stories that her dad had told her. "Friend," Desmeralda began, "what kind of life have you had here in the last 10 years? Sophie could see that the fawn looked a bit worried, but her sympathy was ruined when Clara said through gritted teeth, "He looks a bit sheepish." "It's a goat, not a sheep," Sophie whispered back, seeing the humour but really not wanting to laugh, partly because of the situation, but more pressingly because it wasn't funny. Desmeralda continued before the fawn could say anything. "I personally have been locked up and kept away from my family for 10 long years. I was kept prisoner in Zatfor for no reason other than I was different." "Not entirely true," Clara added. Sophie didn't listen to her. She wanted to know exactly where Desmeralda was going with this. "For 10 years, I missed my son growing up and spent all my time locked away as what the humans considered to be a monster. Most of the people I got to know were good, innocent creatures, not the monsters that the humans make them out to be." Sophie couldn't decide if she was lying or not. She was obviously telling the truth about the 10 years locked away, but the innocent creatures, that couldn't be true. She hoped Miss Sissons would say something in her ear to reassure her, but no such reassurance came. Surely there weren't more innocent creatures in there. The ones that Sophie, Clara and Yasmin had seen last time certainly were scary, but wouldn't anyone be after being forced to live like that for 10 years? By now, the fawn looked like he'd forgotten the question, but Desmeralda prompted him. "What has it been like for you, friend?" "Fortunately, my family and I were rescued by the residents of Meliora," he said through almost crying eyes. "What or where is Meliora?" Clara asked. Nobody knew the answer. "But with the imminent danger the world is now in, we cannot risk staying there. We're happy to take our chances in the underworld rather than stay here," the fawn concluded, and various other mythicals who must also have come from Meliora cheered in support. "Any ideas on this Meliora?" Sophie asked, aiming her question at Miss Sissons. "No idea," Miss Sissons replied. Desmeralda smiled a sympathetic smile. "Come with us, friend. Come to the underworld. We will offer you the life that you deserve. This world as we know it does not have long left." "Why not?" Yasmin shouted, before cowering down behind the ogre in front of her. She is coming, Desmeralda said, aiming it roughly where the voice had come from. Who? Replied another voice. Desmeralda took a second to compose herself. Condenar. Silence descended across the already quiet group. A few gasps were let out, and almost everyone looked on in horror at what they had just heard. The 4 youngsters all reacted in the same way, though. They all turned to look at each other and just mouthed the word, who? Get back here, Miss Sisson's voice said in all their ears. Get back here, now. No, Sophie replied. Can you tell us that Shadow never locked up any innocent creatures? No, and now you demand we all come back at the mention of a name? Miss Sissons tried to speak again, but Sophie knew it would just be more begging for them to return, and so cut her off. You want us back? You get in your avatar and come and fetch us. Silence came from Miss Sissons' end for a second before, I can't. Some of those mythicals will recognise me. You know I can't come. Do we? Sounds to me like you're scared of them. Why don't you disguise yourself as we've done? She retorted. You never leave that building. You're no better than King was. Of all the people Sophie thought she might snap at, all the lying and getting frustrated with, Miss Sissons wasn't at the top of that list, but she wasn't offering anything in the way of help now, and from what the 4 of them were hearing, she could potentially be lying about a lot of other things as well. There was a loud humming noise in the ears of all 4 children, which caused each of them to hold their heads briefly. Everything returned to normal just as quickly as it had changed. What was that? Clara asked, aiming it at Miss Sissons. No answer came. Well done, Soph, Yasmin said sarcastically, assuming that Miss Sissons had turned off the radio so that she didn't snap back at Sophie because of her rather rude remarks or because she didn't want to be seen to be snapping. Sophie composed herself and tried to calm down. She would think about apologising to Miss Sissons, but not yet. The whispering that they had spoken in at the start was rapidly getting louder, and if it carried on, the 4 children would wind up drawing attention to themselves. Do we dare ask who Condenar is? Clara asked, noticing the same thing as Sophie and keeping her voice to little more than a whisper. Sophie shrugged, as did Yasmin. Kingsley just kept on staring at the woman he knew to be his mum. No story Sophie's dad had ever told her contained the name Condenar. It would have stood out in her memory. There was something in the back of her mind, but right at that moment she couldn't select it. All the creatures seemed to know it, though. As the silent state of shock began to disappear, nervous chattering took over. Desmeralda began to try to compose her crowd by repeatedly lowering her hands. We can't just abandon Earth, came another voice. Not when she is coming. They'll be helpless. Yes, they will, Desmeralda replied, suddenly taking on a much more severe tone. What about their children? Came another voice. We can't just leave their young to suffer as well. Desmeralda nodded. Those too young to remember us have no understanding of what the world was like before they were born. The adults don't talk about it. They don't know that for years humans locked up creatures like us, almost treated us so badly that we were forced to live in the shadows. They only see the technology and the glamour that exists in the world now. There were a few seconds where the mythicals all seemed to turn to each other to see what each of them felt. After that, they all shrugged shoulders and couldn't see anything they could disagree with Desmeralda about. What shall we do? Came another voice from the crowd. Desmeralda turned and faced the origin of the voice. You go on to the underworld. Seek safety with your family. We will take care of you. We will help to prepare the world for the battle that will lie ahead for the sake of the children. It was at this point that the Monticello and Astomy stepped forward to take a more active role. I lived in Zatvor with Desmeralda. She is true to her word, and I would like to show you how strongly I believe in her and prove to you that the underworld is safe and not the terrible place the humans make it out to be, the Monticello said. The mythicals seemed to like this idea, and so the Monticello and the Astomy stepped forward towards the portal. Desmeralda said nothing, but made a gesture implying that the 2 creatures continued to make their way towards the portal. Without a second's further thought, the 2 ran at the portal and jumped into it. The crowd gasped as the 2 creatures disappeared, and they turned back to look at Desmeralda. Some even started clapping. You won't hurt the children, a new voice shouted up, clearly impressed by what they had just witnessed. Desmeralda smiled. Hurt them? Of course not. It is our duty to prepare them. We will save who we can and do our best for the others. My changeling sisters and I can use our powers for good, despite what the human adults think, and get the children ready for the battle to come than anything the humans can do. My son will definitely come with me. He has missed out on growing up already enough without even more. So, rest assured, I am saving you, not dooming you. I would not take my son with us if there were dangers ahead, would I? More shuffling and mutters of agreement came from the crowd. Sophie could sense there was a twist in Desmeralda's tale somewhere, but couldn't work out what. "Where is your son now?" asked the fawn, who was still starstruck, standing next to Desmeralda. Desmeralda bowed her head. "They have him. The people who locked me up. They took him from me." She went to wipe a tear away from her eye. "Well, that isn't true," Yasmin said, slightly too loudly. Sophie looked at her across the row. "Isn't it?" she asked. As Sophie thought about it, she could see where Desmeralda was coming from. Looking at it completely from her point of view, what was she actually doing that was wrong? She had been locked up for doing nothing. She had had her son taken away from her and missed out. She had been kept away for 10 years, and from the stories Sophie was hearing from the likes of the fawn, there was no life ready and waiting for her out there. She just feared the humans and whoever this Condonar was, and wanted to do right by others who had suffered as she had. "Is this the changeling's plan?" Clara asked. "They aren't out to hurt any children or spirit them away. They want to save all the other mythicals from the damage this Condonar will do and help prepare the human race for war while in the underworld. Desmeralda's changeling knew this, but her human side didn't know." Sophie couldn't see how what Clara had just said was wrong. At no point in any of her interactions with Desmeralda had she ever issued any kind of threat to any child. When she'd grabbed her by the arm in the car park, it was all to get to Miss Sissons. At no other point had Desmeralda ever felt dangerous to her. She had just assumed she was dangerous from what the adults had told her because she looked a bit different from the average human. "How do you know about Condonar, and why haven't you said anything before?" Sophie shouted, thinking that asking who exactly she was might just give the four of them away. Desmeralda turned again to look for the voice. "Upon my release from Zatvor, my changelings all over the world have gathered you all here after patrolling streets and rounding up all you mythicals. Even without me, they looked for a solution for all. They tell me of the great sanctuary of Meliora that has kept millions of you safe for 10 years. The ones that have come from there tell me that even the world would not be enough to save you from the arrival of Condonar. In my human form, the mythicals would not come near me, but they knew from my brief flashes into Changeling that she was coming. My human form had no memory of any of the conversations I had in Zatvor about her arrival. I was weak and useless. To human me, it was just a story and rumours." "What rumours?" Yasmin asked, again showing the confidence of a school counsellor. "My human form grew to be friends with the husband of Condonar in Zatvor," Desmeralda began. "For years he explained how his wife would want revenge on those that entombed him away from her and to make them better and learn from it. As the years went by, he became more and more delirious. My human half stopped listening to him and wrote him off, as humans do. I remember everything, and on my orders, my changelings rallied everyone here that they could find, knowing that the inevitable doom awaits everyone that stays. Condonar will bring fatality and devastation to those who stole her partner, and that comes from those who have fled her previously, not just from me. We need to leave before she arrives. This is not our battle, and we will not be caught in the crossfire." "So an angry lady is coming for the adults because they locked up her husband?" Yasmin summarised. "Sounds like it," Sophie replied. Turning her radio back on, Sophie asked Miss Sissons what her thoughts were now. Still, no reply came. "What is she doing?" Clara asked. "No idea, but it isn't normal," Sophie replied. It was at that point that the portal to everyone's right let out the most enormous clap of thunder it had done yet. The Sophie Hardy saga was written and produced by M.R. Dale and narrated and produced by Leona Hall. If you enjoyed it and would like to continue to follow the adventures of Sophie and her friends in coming episodes, then please subscribe through one of the many podcast providers out there. The links for each of these can be found on our website. If you require more information, visit our many social media channels, or if you would like to purchase a copy of the book, then be sure to check out our website, www.sophiehardysaga.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy.